digitaljamsessions.com.
Hello and welcome to this Digital Jam session. We're coming at you live from Summer in the City here at London's Excel Centre. We are in the lovely bar at the Sunbourne Yacht Hotel, so it is slightly noisy and you'll be listening to the lovely music in the background as we speak to a lovely group of people here. We have with us the wonderful Jason Perry. What's the formal name of your company these days?
Hello World Live. Hello World, yeah.
Wonderful. Okay. We've got Oscar from Unity. We've got Mookie. So many places I can't even name the places that you're from. Originally Chicago. Formerly BBC, ITV, MTV, etc. and so forth. We have Emily, formerly from Upload, who is now freelancing and back in the UK, all the way back from San Francisco. We have the lovely Adam and Olivia from Digitales. And we have Neil from
TV Tech Global.
TV Tech Global, there you go. Wonderful. Well, thank you all for joining us as somebody decides to start making a cocktail with lots of rumbly ice in the background. First of all, I would like you to very briefly explain a little bit more about what you do, because each of you are doing amazing things and it'd be lovely for our listeners to find out a little bit more about what you do. So I'm going to start at this end. Neil, why don't you tell us a bit more about what you do?
I'm Neil Romanek. I'm the editor of TV Tech Global, and we are a business-to-business magazine for primarily the broadcast industry. We cover tools and technology for production, distribution, workflows for broadcasters, and some YouTubers, which is why we're here at Summer in the City to see what's going on in the YouTube world. Okay. And we're online at tvtechglobal.com.
Awesomeness. And for those who don't know, Summer in the City is apparently the UK's largest YouTuber festival. So, having said all of that, Olivia, why don't you tell us a little bit about what you guys get?
Hi, so Olivia Rutter. I run a YouTube channel called DigiTales. Easiest way to find it is digitales.tv if you want to check it out. So we focus on doing tech news and rumors. We also do gadget reviews and unboxings and these type of things. And we also do some gaming and stuff as well.
Hi, Adam, also from DigiTales. Mainly we worked in virtual reality, analytics, data visualization, and we have more of a background in industries, so working across large enterprise companies and things like that.
Hi, this is Emily Savage. I've just got back relatively recently from San Francisco, having worked as the community development lead for Upload. Upload are one of the world's biggest VR AR accelerators, with both a media arm for news as well as co-working and education. I'm now back here in the UK working with a number of startups to look at their VR strategy and generally just connecting the dots as to where we're at with VR and AR here in London and the UK.
Hey everyone, Mookie of Mookie International, formerly, as Tanya mentioned, MTV, BBC, ITV, and many, many other broadcasters. And I'm an executive digital producer with a core background in the music industry and broadcast space in entertainment. I've been exec producer on things like The Voice and MTV for 10 to 12 years. So I work closely in content production, which includes VR, AR, MR, SR, live streaming, apps, websites, social channels across the board, community content production. And I am currently dealing with certain digital aspects of Jamiroquai. It's an interesting project because there's something that could be very large and fat with a PH coming up. So maybe I can reveal that in the next podcast. Please edit this. Thank you. Bye.
So we have someone who wears hats. I'm Oscar Clark. I'm basically at most games trade events, standing on a stage talking about making games for Unity. I also spend my time working on a project based on the Rocky Horror Show, which making a tablet-based game for that. And I do a whole bunch of other stuff, so we'll move swiftly on.
I'm Jason Perry. I've got a voice like a dog. So this isn't a dog, this is a human. This is a proper human man. I've got a body like a 45-year-old baby and a voice like a dog. So that's what I do. Just explaining what I sound like. What was I? I used to be a singer in a band many years ago, signed to Warner's for 10 years, and we toured the world a million times with Green Day and Blink and lots of big pop punk bands, and did all right. And then I got into making records as a producer and worked with a lot of big rock and pop bands and had lots of success doing that. And then got a little bit bored of that kind of format of spending 6 months in the studio and then watching it not get on Radio 1 and watching the album die. Decided 2 years ago to do something really different in this space, in the YouTuber space, and that's kind of just treating people as humans and as talent, not as subscriber numbers. So everything in this world is followed by a metric at the moment. So you say name and it's like, how many views have they got? It's not like, oh, they're good at something. So my job is to find what people are good at and work with them as talent and get the best out of them as human beings and as people. Because I kind of think the YouTube space, having kids of a certain age, is about the most punk rock thing that's happened in my life since punk rock. Whereas my kids don't need any gatekeepers, and they're just speaking one-on-one with people that they love and have got their brains and their heart and have got them, got them captivated. So to cut a long story short, we're building a massive live event, an immersive secret cinema meets Disney for YouTube talent to come and actually enjoy themselves for once. Because the live space at the moment is boring and it's convention-based and full of meet and greets. So that's what we're doing. We're trying to build a platform for you to come, and whatever you do online, we supercharge it. And because of that, you'll be like, oh my God, this is ace. I feel good. And everybody else will feel good. So
let's clarify. Jason's event is in Birmingham in October, correct?
Yeah.
Awesomeness. Now, small claims to fame for Jace that most people won't know is that Jace also produced the Moshi Monsters. Moshi Rocks album. I'm allowed to chuckle because I work with Jason at Mind Candy on this stuff, so I'm allowed to chuckle about it. But
150,000 physical records in a market that doesn't demand it anymore.
With no airplay and no TV play, I might say. We had no radio play, no TV play. So anyway, having said all of that, I do want to follow on from what Jason is talking about here, which is this idea that we're in this really metric-driven environment and everything is about prove the numbers, prove to me the quantity of what you've got going on. And we have kind of stepped away a little bit from the idea of personally treating our creators as creatives, as people who have, innovative ideas and thoughts. And, oftentimes, especially in VR, especially when you're creating new VR experiences, it's kind of like, prove to me who the audience is. Prove to me that you can make this thing work and that you're going to get 1 billion views for this thing before I even give you the money to make this thing. And I'm kind of curious, Emily, from your perspective, obviously you guys at Upload, you were doing a lot of really kind of, I'm going to say guerrilla, kind of, just hack it together, throw it together, see if it works kind of stuff. Did you find that there was maybe a little bit too much focus on, are we going to get views for this piece of content? Or, was it a kind of case, let's just be creative, let's just, make it happen?
Yeah, I think it was more the latter, which was really nice. I mean, I arrived in when Upload had already done a fantastic job of putting together a decent size social audience. I mean, their Facebook page alone had 100,000, well, just churned over 100,000 likes while I was there. And then they had their Twitter and Instagram and YouTube followers as well. So they were already in a good position. But what was really nice is it's still kind of a family type approach to things. So their creative director, Oz, was running the studio, and it really was just a mix of his ideas and our ideas as to what we pumped out of that studio each week. And sometimes that would be him just running around San Francisco with his 360 camera stuck into his phone, and sometimes interviewing people on the fly while they're in like cool, trendy areas of San Francisco. And then, as we say, he and Danny Bittman, who's a pretty famous tilt brush artist for the VR community. Between them, they then started curating their own ideas as to what came out. As we were talking about earlier, that mixed reality format as well, experimenting, what did that mean? But yeah, I think that's the really nice thing about the VR space still, that, as we said, there's no expectations. So you don't have to come at it saying, I am a very, very famous artist or creator already. You can kind of just play around and see what happens. And that does, lift that veil of the kind of corporate world running a creative industry. Instead, at the moment, it's really kind of ground up growth and a bunch of crazy and very, very young people, surprisingly young people in San Francisco that are running the show at the moment, mixed in with some, of course, big players like Unity getting heavily involved. Yeah.
Okay, so Mookie, from the other end of this spectrum then, for a lot of your clients and a lot of the things that you're doing, it's kind of a corporation like a BBC or an ITV coming in saying, we want to do 360 content. And there's obviously a certain degree of structure that goes with that. And I'm kind of curious from your perspective if you've felt that there is perhaps a bit of a limitation around that structure and kind of the demand of, we've got to do it in this way and we need X amount of content and it's got to, adhere to certain principles or meet certain points. Do you find that quite tough?
How much time do we have on this topic? All the time. 24/7, 1,000%. And people change their minds all the time too. Every broadcast is different. Every client's different. Every artist is different. Every fan is different. The biggest hurdles, which we've talked about before, are budgets and also people's ideas and expectations about what they want. And a lot of times there are a lot of stakeholders involved that hold nothing and don't eat steak and don't have that. And it's tricky where one big, giant, fantastic idea, say in January, is something completely different by March, and it's something completely different by July, and it's something completely different by November. By January, there's a whole new budget in place, and it's been whittled down to either something a lot less of what, maybe 100th of what the original idea was, or you could get like a total twist. I can't really compare any of these kinds of, every single thing I've worked on has been very different with different stakeholders where, ITV is a commercial channel. So you're going to have brands involved. You're going to have integration. You're going to have that kind of stuff, which is great because that's my background. And I buzz off of that. But I also had a completely, supremely comforting, wonderful time at the BBC where I didn't have those limitations. And I'm making content for fans and a broadcaster. And you know what? But everybody liked it. So, and I pay tax. So, yeah, those stakeholders were a lot, if we're going to take that example of the BBC and the voice stuff, I was given a blank sheet of paper and say, let's make some VR. And I got to work really closely with the BBC taster teams, the BBC R&D teams, and experiment with different tech and get involved with the research and see what to do. But then also, shit, we got to make it now. Now what do we do, right? Throw a bunch of GoPros on my head on a hard hat and walk around and talk to Will.i.am. It's like, and then if I make, when this project goes through, it'll be something completely, totally different with an artist, which I can't mention. But the next podcast I will. I'm not going to stop talking because I have the mic.
I think one thing we tried to do recently, and I don't mean to sound like a caveman or a Luddite, but it's getting back to that, giving the audience what they kind of want, not what they need. And, it's like a re-education when you've grown up in the last 10 years where everything's data-driven. So you release something and you track the data and you go, well, was it successful or wasn't it? In about a week. And if you look back at music and you think, well, some of the greatest, most profound records, like the Beastie Boys, Paul's Boutique, which was a disaster when it came out, the biggest return record in Capitol history, is now the record that resonates with most Beastie Boys fans. Or Pet Sounds by the Beach Boys, that stunk when it came out. The Beach Boys nearly over. These are the things that actually through the test of time. It's a good example would be Daft Punk with Nile Rodgers when they came out with the Sheet cover, Get Lucky. Turns out that people wanted to hear a bit of disco then, not a new Daft Punk record. But no one really knew it. But it's that difference in giving people what they want and what they need. And in a data-driven economy or world that we live in, that's really hard to do now because instincts have kind of gone out the window and heart have gone out the window. And sometimes you just need to have the confidence to follow your heart, especially when you're in a recording studio or you're creating something magical. And there's also a thing, I guess, with technology. It's like when flat screen TVs became cheap. So every dentist waiting room in the world had to have a flat screen TV in it with nothing to show on it. Or you walk into vets and they've got a flat screen TV. It's like, now we need a VR thing. It's like, do you really need that? Have you actually said to yourself why you need a VR? You obviously need it on for the BBC or ITV and stuff, but why do you need that? Why do you need an app? Snapchat have got a great app. Why do you need an app? All you want to do is try and reach people's hearts so you can use other platforms. And there's this kind of land grab that everybody needs to have something. And what they need to have is an amazing product that resonates with them and makes them feel something. And I think that's what gets lost. That's a big shift for me. It's realizing that now, and it's not all about data. The BBC are the same. You have meetings at the BBC, and they're trying to create magic all the time, but at the same time, they've got data that they need to prove goes back to their channels. And when you work in the YouTube space, the data won't go back to the BBC channels; it'll go back to the creators channels, and you can see that conflict. And I stood up in the meeting last week and went, "It's your job just to make cool shit. You're the BBC." But even for the BBC, they've got to follow that all the time. Where the eyeballs going? How do we harvest that? How do we collect that? And it's kind of like, why don't you just make something great?
Clash with like the commercial elements and things like that. Yeah, well, in a different project, it was with Radio 1 and the YouTube creators. It was about 2 years ago when they were doing their Monday YouTube, and it was just the tricky thing about finding. Well, how do you prove that success, and how do you do that? And then
talking back to film, not to the iPlayer.
Exactly. Yeah, but at the same time, they are responsible as a major broadcaster to be trying something different. Yeah. But I think I agree with you 1,000,000% about maybe it's time, a lot of projects just rein it in, make it simple, and make it something that's like a A-B experience, not an A-B-C-D-E.
I have a confession to make. I love data. Data's amazing.
I love data too.
Data's awesome, and the thing is, let's work out what data's for, though. And there's a difference between data and insight. Data is the information. So if I'm going to create something, particularly games, and I don't have data, I do not know objectively whether the thing I'm making is fun. I absolutely don't know that. And the only way the use of data is the thing that's the question, not the data itself. It is an amazing thing that we can actually have a dialogue with our audience because we can observe what they do, not what they say they do. Particularly in games, that's an incredible change for the better. What's the problem is when we start expecting that data at the creative stage to lead the discussion. It shouldn't.
Well, that's the thing is I think what we're talking about are very different mediums in terms of, when you're talking about music or TV, and that's a very creative driven medium that actually it should be more about the artistic, conversation and creative conversation. Whereas with gaming, data is so fundamental to what we do within gaming. It's logical to have that data conversation.
Maybe I'm being naive, but when Zelda was created, was that created on the back of data, or was it created because this is a really cool idea? When the great moments in life are created, they're generally created in magical moments where you don't really give a shit. You just get inspired by something and you go with it, and then it builds into something amazing, or it fails. And today we've kind of forgotten that a bit, where data leads the conversation, or marketing, or somebody else leads the conversation, rather than God, whatever you want to call that creative spark that needs to be there to have something magical happen. So we're going to run out of magic because we just keep rehashing Marvel films because it turns out they're popular. It's like,
I find this really interesting because one of the things that we see a lot of at the moment is the film studios creating VR content, not because they necessarily should or that the film needs the VR content, but because it's kind of a thing they can tick off on the checklist of the things that they need to make, and it's not about the creativity of it, and it doesn't necessarily add anything to the movie. It's just, they did it because they could. So I kind of see where you're coming from on this, but I want to kind of flip over to this side of the table, and Miki's waving at me.
One quick thing. With those films making that kind of content, it will be good, mostly. Because they've got the budget.
No. Budgets does not mean good VR.
As far as like a production quality goes, they'll have some of those.
I completely disagree with you in terms of budget does not mean good VR. I have seen some expensive VR that has got absolutely no narrative to it, and it's completely pointless, and there's just no reason to have done it. I do genuinely think big budget does not equal good VR.
I agree. I agree with you there. I'm just saying they've got budgets. Sometimes that's why they make it.
That's fair enough.
That answers the question. Why are they making it? Because they got the money.
But that's the thing, is just because you can doesn't mean you should. I know I rant about this an awful lot, but I'm going to stick to my guns on this, which is just because you got budgets or just because you got the technology doesn't mean that you need to make that content. And that's part of the issue here. Is I think
it's like when Madonna. I remember seeing an interview back on Jonathan Ross show years ago, and Madonna had a new record out where she rapped in it, and he was teasing Madonna because she's rapping on this song. And she's like, well, I want to rap so I can, and it's like, just because you can doesn't mean you should. Yeah. Same reason why, I don't know, Snoop Dogg doesn't sing. He's a rapper. It just doesn't mean you have to try it. Yeah. Too busy smoking. Anyway.
But I do tend to think it is a case of, especially with VR and AR technology and immersive technology, everybody wants to dabble. And it doesn't necessarily, lead to good things. It's not necessarily relevant for them.
No, I was going to argue that it's good to watch crap stuff too, because then you know what not to do.
No, because if you're working for a company that isn't in the entertainment industry and they're prototyping, and they get that one team, that one person who's an evangelist around VR, and they're given $50,000 to do a prototype, and it doesn't take off, they don't do it well, it could be years before they get the opportunity to try again. So if you are going to try, you really do need to think about the use case and make sure it's a valid one.
Yeah, and I'm going to add to that in as much as we're all in our bubble. We all work with this technology, and frankly, a lot of people are not anywhere near this technology yet. What the stuff we're doing is stuff that mainstream populations will get to see it and experiment with it maybe in 5 or even 10 years' time. And so we have this burden of responsibility because we are in our little bubble of the technology. And it's one of those things, again, that I really worry sometimes, that nobody is asking the moral or ethical question as they create this content. They're just creating it because they can. And it's actually one of my personal bugbears around like people creating horror experiences in VR, because they're not thinking about the impact of throwing somebody into a headset with little to no warning, putting them into a horror experience, and the natural human instinct to protect oneself from that kind of experience is try and cover your eyes, which is pointless if you've got a headset on your head, because all you're doing is covering the headset with your hands, right? So you're creating this environment where people are like panicking, ripping these headsets off and damaging them, for starters, but personally have a traumatic experience with the technology that puts them off with the technology for the next however many years.
It happened to my dad.
Yeah.
I put him on an Oculus Rift in his own living room. Yeah. I forgot he was scared of heights, and I put him on one of the skyscrapers, and I haven't been able to get him back on it because he's like, "You're going to do that again." He thought I did it on purpose because I'm that type of son. But honestly, it was by mistake. The next demo that got loaded up was just so happened to be at the top of a skyscraper on a plank, and that was it. He's not gone back in since. So I agree. Yeah.
I know. Yeah. Never spoken to you. I think I do agree, and I do absolutely agree with your point in terms of relevant experiences are absolutely necessary to pushing and accelerating technology. I know, like, with my mother, who at the moment still sees it as just some weird thing for gamers, if I put her into a medical type scenario, that would be the win for her. My argument around corporate money is that it is necessary at this stage of the industry. That the whole point is that those guys with deep pockets are helping to push forward technology development. You know, the hardware, it's costly, and the fact that we've got huge investment from Facebook, from Google, from Samsung, HP, all of the big boys are now starting to kind of see this as a realistic opportunity. And the main reason for that, of course, is the enterprise driver, and we need some silly brands to make mistakes with big budgets, and then afterwards, those of us, whatever, that are creators with not such a big budget, can at least have the opportunity to play around with it because it's mainstream.
So here's the question I'm going to throw out then, which is this. So fair enough, we need some people to make some mistakes, break things, and move quick. I get it. My question would be, if we are asking these people to sink their big money in, such as, for example, right now, all the PR budgets and the marketing budgets that we're seeing people sink in millions of dollars into these, VR experiences, what happens, or at what point do we need to shift from those big budgets being sunk in with absolutely no expectation of return to a point where somebody says, what's your forecast? What is the revenue model? How is this sustainable, and how do I get my money back that I've put my money into making VR content?
We're there right now. So again, outside the entertainment industry, we have a number of clients coming to us, defense clients, manufacturing clients, and saying, we want to get rid of our car showrooms. We want to just have VR. Now, we don't want to make that change until we can show that the data shows that people will still come in, have the experience, and convert and still buy cars, etc. So they're prototyping right now. The other thing is they want use cases which have a monetary value next to them. So they want training simulators which prove that if we put somebody through VR, we do not need to fly them out to an actual oil rig to get their first level of training. That saves approximately 5 million, for example, BP every year. And we will sink in 300k to build the first demo. Those questions are being asked of us right now. I don't think we have to wait. If you're outside entertainment, they will not invest until they have that use case.
But it's also happening inside games, but it depends on the studios. If you look at someone like Tommy Palm and his team, what they're doing is to make commercial VR. They're making sure that they plan and they target and they make experiences that have an audience. I mean, that's already happening. But I think we need to kind of separate this argument in different tranches. When you mentioned earlier on, this is the punk rock of making games is the punk rock of the modern age. And we can do that. We've got free tools. We've got mobile VR out there where we can use the phones that we've already got, whether it's cardboard box, for goodness sake. I mean, there's so many, and there are better examples. Daydream is amazing for what it is and the simplicity of it. But then again, we've got to separate that from the marketing of the platform itself, and making sure that people's understanding of what they can expect, what that experience is like, and making sure that that's a good, positive, and enjoyable moment that they first have with VR. That, I think, is a different thread, and not necessarily the responsibility of a small developer to do that.
No, and here's the thing, and I think I kind of want to follow through on this one, which is that the general mainstream perception of what VR is very broad. There's people who do not really understand what this thing is. There are people who are quite technically savvy and understand the differences. But then there's also, just even within the industry, like if you go and speak to a movie studio and you say VR, what they really mean is 360 filmmaking. They don't mean actual VR game engine environments. And so there's this broad term that's being used across the entire spectrum. You have the diehards who are like, no, 360 is not VR. And then you've got the people who are just like, well, I want to make a VR film. And what they really mean is I want to make a 360 film. And so that there is this general perception piece that needs to happen just amongst the public when they're buying into these headsets, when they're buying into the technology, to understand the differences between these things. And, going back to like bad experiences, it's like, irrespective of which type of headset your dad had on, the fact is he now thinks VR is like scary and not something he wants to do. So it wouldn't matter if you offered him a different type of headset further down the line. If he did it on a cardboard to start with and then he moves on to an Oculus or a HTC Vive, it won't make any difference, because as far as he sees it, all HMDs are VR. So it doesn't matter whether it was a mobile HMD or a tethered HMD, he's just going to think that. And that's how most of the mainstream public
That's the story that I told you before we came over. So we were attending a conference, and it was a large organization, had VR on their stand to attract people over. And when I went to have a go at the VR, they had Highend VR, and I put it on, and they had just a 360 video in HD. So it was all blurry. Yeah. Now they had C-level people from all major organizations all around the world queuing up, trying it out, coming off and going, meh. So every time I'm speaking, like when I was at VR World, I introduced, just like you did today, this is what I mean by VR. Yes. I do not mean 360 video. Exactly. I'm talking about interactive VR. Now everybody put their hands down if I ask, have you had a VR experience? Yes. And then hardly anybody puts their hands up. Exactly. Yeah. So it does make it harder for us who work in more of the high-end interactive VR to get people to try it because of VR mobile and 360 video if it's not done properly. Yeah.
And here's the other thing I also want to kind of pick up on. I'm going to follow through on what you were saying earlier about the defense industry, because I'm saying this because Oscar and I spent 2 weeks with the defense industry recently at various workshops. And it's one of those things that...
2 days over 2 weeks.
2 days over 2 weeks, but it felt like 2 weeks. Basically, it is one of those really interesting things in as much as people who are non-entertainment focused VR have been around this technology for absolutely a huge amount of time. We're talking multiple decades, 30 years on average, especially for the defense industries who have their own terminology for this. I know I rant about this a lot when I'm doing like conferences and panels, but it's really important that people realize that this is not new. We are not reinventing a wheel here. It's been around for a while, and certainly in the defense industries, they've been doing it long enough to have their own terminology for it. Calling it synthetic wrap or synthetic training or synthetic worlds, whatever you want to call it. Synthetic is their reference to anything that is immersive tech, and there are plenty of people who they're working in that space on a commercial B2B basis, making plenty of money. So when people are talking about things like alt space VR going down, and everybody's like, oh no, it's terrible, AR is the thing now, let's just forget about the VR thing. It's like, hey guys, there's still this whole commercial side of the industry that's doing just fine.
There's also a real kind of gap in people's understanding of expectation. It was so much hype talking about the VR and AR and all this kind of stuff for so long. And so when we actually had the devices, people were disappointed it was only $1 billion industry. I mean, come on. I mean, we've only just got the devices and it's $1 billion. Expectations is the problem, and this is something that JR, who's the head of Unity, was talking about not that long ago. And we definitely know that the kinds of expectations people have is going to continue to rise, and that's fine. But the technology is going to take a while to catch up. Yeah. But when it does, actually, the really interesting thing is what happens to this technology after that. What visual computing means in 5-10 years' time is going to profoundly change, just profoundly as the smartphones change the way we live. This visual technology will change everything.
I'm looking...
Maybe controversial. What's the word?
Hit me with a controversial question. Do it.
Apart from AR on your phone or your tablets, can anybody actually name a AR consumer product that's out there? VR is out there. You can buy it from Amazon. That's on your phone. Name an AR device.
That's not physically on a phone.
That's on the consumer. It's
So Merge Cube is an AR device that doesn't require necessarily goggles or anything like that. Got Magic Bench from Disney, which technically isn't out as such, but bearing in mind it's Disney, it will go into their theme parks reasonably soon. I'm going to shut up because other people might have examples.
I mean, there are some theme park rides already that up in Alton Towers and in Thorpe Park, they've got theme parks.
Caravan's
exactly. Caravan's Ghost Train.
Yep.
I've forgotten the name of the other one.
Yep.
That's VR, yeah, sure. But I mean, the thing is, we're still really in an early.
But it's not out. It doesn't exist.
Yeah, but it's still early days, and that's the whole point. We're on the journey here.
But I'm going to say but HoloLens may not be out, but at the same time, HoloLens is not necessarily the future of AR. Mixed reality is where we're looking at, and what I'm really looking forward to is actually getting rid of the screen, this obsession with screen and with mobile device, tablet device, whatever that thing is, being held up in front of something or having to be in front of something. We're going to get past that soon, and certainly HoloLens is the first generation of that with something that is more glasses, but we're going to see that get smaller and smaller. Everybody's already submitted their patents for contact lenses. We're now seeing environmental AR and VR being created, things like the Magic Bench by Disney. I don't think it's going to be too long.
AR kit slow it down?
I don't think so.
Will we have the same thing with 360 and VR? Are we going to have to explain that AR kit with tablet is not what we're talking about when we're talking about?
I don't think it's a problem. I don't think it's a problem though, and here's why. And Neil, I want you to throw in on this in a minute. But the thing is, he's waiting, he's biding his time. He's biding his time. But with AR kit, here's my thing. I think that AR kit actually will be a really helpful tool in getting everybody exposed to the technology and the terminology and understanding how this stuff works. Because frankly, as soon as, this sounds really like I work for Apple, as soon as Apple get involved with things, everybody begins to see it as a lifestyle choice. They begin to see this as something that is part of their everyday life in a way that is not, any other supplier, any other manufacturer. It takes so much longer to convince people that this is something that should be part of their mainstream life. And I think Apple getting on board with this and bringing AR into people's lives, you're going to see some cool shit go down. You're going to see people getting really into it just because they can, because it's Apple and it's cool and it's lifestyle. And even if it's not necessarily the best example of the technology or whatever that thing is, it's going to expose more people.
So if you're a creator today, and we've got obviously Oscar Community here, would we say, like there was the whole hype about I have to have an app,
Yeah.
Is it a case now like I have to
you're
have
going to
an
see an
AR
explosion. You're going to see such an explosion.
I need to learn Unity. I need to build something.
Sounds like a good mantra to me.
Unreal.
But hold up. Neil has been quietly biding his time.
Stewing and everything.
Bring it to us. Tell us what your thoughts are on this.
I mean, one of the things I'm looking at it from a broadcast perspective too, because I do a lot of work with broadcasters and conversations with broadcasters, and I think it's something that happens in every media or every medium, is that people are wondering what is VR for, what is AR for, what is mixed reality for. I know it does something, but what am I going to do with it? And you brought up the idea of if Apple comes up with the AR killer app or AR device or something, that will move it forward, because that becomes a lifestyle choice. Yes. And I think that's kind of a key thing. It stops when Apple gets a hold of it. It stops being technology.
Exactly.
In a way, it's and that was the whole thing. Think different. It's not like use your cool tool in a tooly technology way. It's like it's about how you think about something and how you present yourself. Or it's an emotional thing that's going on. And when Apple comes out with a product, so I think that's what will be the big shift, is when people are able to stop thinking about the technology and able to start thinking about the stuff on a more visceral level, which kids do when they sort of play with Pokemon Go, because it's just a thing on your phone that's got something to do with what's happening in the real world, and it's all intuitive, and it's an emotional experience. There's no real, at least when I'm looking at my daughter playing it, my daughter's not thinking about the technology in her hands. So I think there has to be a shift that goes beyond the technology to thinking about the stuff in an experiential and an emotional level.
And that's really true. People forget that. Kind of debating about technology and stuff. My kids don't give a monkeys about technology. They think technology for old people is boring. It's just stuff to them. It may as well be an ice cream. It's just, is this engaging? Do I like it? Do I get a kick out of it? Do the kids at school who are cool like it? That's it. It's pop. It's just stuff for kids. It's always been the same in the 80s, 70s, 60s. And we kind of, again, it's back to that heart of why you need it. You need it. Kids are different to adults, and obviously
But it's that social requirement of, I need it because it's part of everyday social life. It's like when we were doing Moshi Monsters, and it was that whole thing of we want it to be the thing they talk about in the playground, not the thing that their parents are telling them to play, and it was always that kind of thing of how do we make it the cool thing that everybody's talking about in the playground. I think it's the same with this type of thing. It's like, how do we make content that people want to talk about rather than how do we obsess about a piece of technology?
That's what hit home to me. We once went to LA for 5 weeks and got an Airbnb down in Newport Beach for the whole family. And first thing my wife did was hide the TV remote so our 2-year-old wouldn't throw it in the pool. And then it's the last day of the trip, 5 weeks later, and we realise we can't find the TV remote, and we're looking for it everywhere, and it's in the drawer where she put it. And our kids haven't turned the TV on in 5 weeks. My 12-year-old and 13-year-old don't care about the TV anymore. I said, what have they been doing? I don't know, it's been on their iPads. Yeah. And to me, that was just an amazing moment where you can put all these great devices in front of them and just don't really care.
Yeah.
There's something I actually want to sort of follow up on that. There's a sort of odd thing about the idea of experience and technology, that it's like we're so immersed and so surrounded with technology, and technology is so much a part of our lives that sort of paradoxically it becomes invisible. So it's like I don't really notice that I'm obsessed with my technology all day long. I'm always on my phone. I'm always interacting with my phone using, it's a funny thing that it kind of, that you're already in an augmented reality. You're just holding on to this piece of hardware. So.
Speaking to a device and it's about to be broadcast. At the end of the day, anyone can do that, which is amazing. It's technology and it's being broadcast by technology, but the question is, does it matter? Do people want it?
Isn't that the point, though? That what we're talking about here is different. Audience experience is one thing, but we're talking about creating audience experiences, and that's why the technology discussion is important. Not because the person consuming it has to care. They don't have to give monkeys. They just need to be able to access it. And actually, devices are barriers in some ways to getting that device. Because if you think about an Xbox or an iPad, the store is the gatekeeper to getting that content to a large extent. And the joy of open internet and all this kind of stuff is that it becomes like electricity, where we only notice its absence.
Well, that's the interesting thing is there's a couple of examples of when we do certain types of conferences where we'll say to everybody, okay, get your phone out. And everybody's got a phone. It's like, great, unlock your phone. And they all unlock it and say, okay, hand it to the person on your left and let them have a rummage. And people literally, you can see the panic in their eyes. You can see, and the fear. And you're like, okay, hand it over. And maybe one person has the guts to actually hand their phone over. And seriously, we've done this before, and somebody actually Instagrammed on somebody else's phone, and it was just like the sense of violation and that kind of emotional response. And it's because we have this emotional attachment to the technology, and that we've got this learned helplessness. I know that certain people don't like it when I use that phrase, but it's a learned helplessness on our mobile technology. If I took your mobile phone away and said, right, you've got to go to a certain destination, and you've got, use public transport, and you need to buy something on the way, and you need to, all these things that we take for granted. We crack out our phone. We know we've got Google Maps to help us get where we want to get to. We want to check our emails. We want to call somebody to tell them we're going to be late, or whatever that thing is. We expect to be able to just do it. And there is that emotional attachment to the technology that it's really unusual, because it is just a box of technology. And yet at the same time, we have this personal, emotional attachment that when it's violated, it's a personal violation as well.
Attachment to the technology or what's on the technology, though. And it's the stuff you put into technology that matters. It's just a phone in a box in a shop. Yeah. So you wouldn't care then if people pass that around. It's what you put into it that matters. And
it's how you use the technology.
It comes to your heart.
So would you have... Okay, when it's all completely a virtual reality or augmented reality, and you've got your contacts, Ed, and you've got your fabulous virtual reality contacts, whatever those are. Yeah. So you don't need a phone.
Yeah, and that's what.
Will you then have to create a phone or a piece of technology or virtual technology to have with you?
No.
Or will you be fine? You'll be free, and you'll be flapping your arms What will happen?
I personally think you'll be free and you'll be flapping your arms around. And the reason I say this is because of wearable technology. And where we are with wearables and where we are with haptics, I think we're going to get to that stage where we don't need a screen. A screen in 10 years' time won't exist anymore, in my humble opinion.
What's fascinating, though, is when we did PlayStation Home, when you were using the menu system, your character, your avatar, was using a PSP.
Yeah.
So we actually did do that. We actually did give you a screen so we could communicate to other people you were currently busy, which is really fascinating.
But here's the interesting thing is that there is this really interesting difference between somebody who's using kind of an MMO-style game environment world VR versus there's two different types of people. There's the people who understand gaming and you hand them a controller and they understand how to navigate and locomotion and how to move around the world and interact with objects and all that kind of stuff. And then you have the people who've never played a freaking game or don't really understand gaming and don't really play on a PS whatever. They just
never lived.
But those are the people who have a genuine, like, natural, organic response to VR in as much as they expect to be able to just swipe something or reach out and touch something and it'll be able to pick it up and interact with that object because they're using their natural instinct of how they would interact with things. And that's the type of VR that I think will be really interesting going forwards, is that stuff that doesn't make the assumption that you're going to have a little controller in your hand and that you're going to be controlling your movement or your locomotion through this world by taking a little game controller and navigating your way through a world. Go on, Neil. You got something to say about this?
No, I was just tripping out there on the... No, I mean, I just think that there's something that a human being wants to pick up a club, or a rock or something. Yeah. And I think that even when all that technology falls away, I think you still want to have the illusion or the idea that you've got something.
Okay.
And that's the generation gap, though. Yeah. I think the Wii from Nintendo did so well with the older generation and casual gamers is because they wanted that tactile feel. They didn't want to learn all those intricate little movements you have to do on a joypad. And so moving your arm to play tennis was very natural. But the hardcore gamers who went out, and the best-selling console pretty much ever is the PS4, and that is back down to small, intricate movements on a joypad. And I think that is a generation gap.
I'm not convinced by that. I mean, I kind of understand where you're going. I think it's more interesting actually when you see people using devices more naturally. When you see people using swipes on a touchscreen, the way that's changed the way very young kids interact and naturally, and now they don't want to use controllers. I mean, actually trying to get controllers back into tablets and phones has been very, very difficult. Yeah, but that's what I'm saying. This generation actually want to do natural motions and natural experiences. And my fascination is when you start seeing people using these virtual worlds where they see their hands. When you start using sticks, it does change everything.
Yeah. Well, we're hard coding a generation, and I think that it'll be interesting to see what kind of locomotion that we adapt as we go forwards with that kind of tech. I'm going to dabble in this really, really briefly just because I'm kind of aware that we've rambled for an awfully long time. But I want to throw this one in there just because right now my personal obsession is Ready Player One and making sure that everybody I know has either read it or has some understanding of what Ready Player One is, just because it's my personal thing at the moment. So on that basis, I'm curious what the thought is in terms of representation within a virtual environment or a digital environment, and how we feel about this idea of accountability within virtual worlds. Because avatars traditionally are used in social media, they're used in gaming, and there's no accountability. You can pretend to be somebody else, especially in social media. You can go and bully whoever you want to bully. You can do all these things, and there's really no accountability for that. But we're starting to see patterns emerge where, for example, in China, they're doing the experiment at the moment where everybody has a social identity, and that identity is actually attached to that person, and they get credits and scores based on how they socially interact with other people within the community. So if they do something negative, it actually has a direct impact on them and what they can do in their life. And I'm just saying, it's scary, but at the same time, I'm kind of curious as to how that will move forward, because especially as we see Second Life release things like Sansar, and we're beginning to see more and more of this kind of idea of social VR and collaborative environments and people having representation of their avatar within this social digital space, and also just generalistically in terms of social media. How do we see that evolving in terms of social identity and accountability for social identity?
I'll tell you one thing that's really missing in pop culture, and I'm showing my age a little bit, but maybe the Avatar thing will help this a little bit, is that if you sit on Sunset Strip now outside a coffee shop, it's just full of people walking past. They've come back from the gym or they're going to raise some money on Kickstarter. But 20 years ago, you had punks and metal kids and kind of pop kids, and you had all these tribes that existed, and Sunset was a great place to see tribalism. Now it's just full of kids going to clubs and everyone looks like a gym jock. So that kind of tribalism that was massive years ago, which identified you as somebody, has kind of gone missing a little bit. And I think people need that because they feel safe in a certain gang or a certain tribe. So you get it in football, and I think humans need it. And pop culture was great for that, and it's kind of gone now out of pop culture. Everyone looks the same. But maybe the Avatar culture will help that bring that back again, where you can be part of a tribe, or your avatar can be part of, show you your personality behind that avatar. It's really important.
Yeah, we still have it. You know, Android voices. Apple. I mean, so, we're joking, but it's actually kind of a key part, and it goes much deeper than that. It's which social media platforms you're using, and in fact, most of it's already virtual. Although I have the audiobook of Ready Player One is brilliant, and Will Wheaton is talking about the character talking to Will.
Will is the man.
Just when I heard he wasn't in it, I've kind of went off the film.
Oh, but Simon Pegg's in it.
But not Will Wheaton. Will Wheaton's
There's
reference.
A lot of in it, so I'm
anyway,
happy.
But my point being that actually that whole sort of experience, that fantasy, is of the era of Second Life and PlayStation Home.
Yeah.
That's gone. That's not what the virtual world future looks like anymore. Yeah. And as much as I'd love it to be, because I was home architect on PlayStation Home, so I'm a bit obsessed with that kind of way of working. What we did see there was tribalism, but we saw tribalism done as entertainment. So we saw people turning up in spaces. So you can only have 60 people in a given space. People would turn up all dressed in red with afro red wigs, and they would turn up to do that. They would spend money on the most expensive item in PlayStation Home, which was a gold suit, which had an animation of money coming out the pockets, and they would make sure that only people who had that gold suit would turn up on the scene, and they would they'd try to kick people out so they could have a scene just full of people who'd spent that money. So there's tribalism becomes more transient, becomes more virtual, becomes more interesting. It still exists.
Yeah.
Coming back to the China point you were making about controls. So I'm somebody who just falls into the millennial category, and obviously we're YouTube creators, so we see a lot of comments coming through, and you get quite a lot of abuse. You can do. Olivia's on the channel all the time, putting herself out there, creating, talking what's on her mind, and people from all over the world, you have no idea who they are, how old they are, what their background is, and they say the most horrible, vulgar things. So when it comes to Ready Player One, the future, I do think there needs to be some accountability. There needs to be, people need to feel that they know the other person knows who they are, and without that, I feel that a number of people will abuse the system. The majority of people will be fine, but it'll just be a small amount will abuse it, and it'll wreck it for everybody. So we can't go freedom of speech, be expressive without any controls. That's my opinion.
Well, it's up to that platform or that content owner to take.
It's interesting because
Do we think that
you think
Old Space suffered in that sense?
Yes.
So I was going to my point around this is going to be I think VR has actually been hopefully will be a really progressive step in terms of people taking responsibility. And I say that because the old version of an avatar, like in gaming, was that you use that avatar to do everything that you wouldn't normally do in life. The naughtiness, Grand Theft Auto being the perfect example. I'm not a massive gamer, but it was still fun to run around on Grand Theft Auto and steal cars and do terrible things. And a beefcake man, exactly. And then, as you say, we progressed into the world of having an online presence and anonymous presence without the attachment of an avatar, and that's why people say such horrendous things, because there is no attachment to who you are, what you look like, you being a real person. And now, like, VR's brought these two worlds together. You've got an avatar that looks like a human that's mixed with your virtual online presence. And that's where, certainly Alt Space felt the consequences, because you would go into Alt Space and several colleagues and friends in the VR space had been in there just to kind of explore, and then you get people saying horrendous things, but with the attachment of actually being a figure in front of you. So, it's opened up new conversations, which I think will be great generally for social media and online, Yeah, Odyssey.
There's also sort of add something, as you know, somebody who's got a kid, a little girl, she's kind of going on Roblox a little bit, and you know, it's Minecraft and stuff, but some group sites, and kind of what she's learning now will inform how she responds to this stuff later on. So I think there's also something about like how do you sort of train or teach kids to operate in that space, and what is anonymity, what does it mean, and how is that going to play out, over their lifetimes, really.
I found this interesting though, in terms of just going back to alt space, and really, really sad to see them not be around anymore. But I don't think he has. But at this point in time, the thing I find really interesting is that although there were some challenges around people behaving really badly in the space, they did come up with a personal bubble. And that was a great response. So for those who don't know, the personal bubble was where if somebody was being abusive to you, there was a personal bubble that you could create that meant that person, that avatar, would basically vanish. Nobody could hear them. They couldn't hear themselves. So you wouldn't be able to see them as the person who was being targeted. They couldn't see themselves as the person trying to target you. And nobody else in the room could see them either. So it just immediately neutralizes the problem and gives you a personal... Yeah. As a platform owner, they did take responsibility.
Although I worry that might itself become a method of abuse, which we've seen in the past. Yeah. I mean, the question is that we're still learning.
Forever.
Yeah.
Douchebags will exist.
Obviously, douchebags. And we are learning. We are learning. We are learning an online social etiquette. We have not evolved that yet. Yeah. And there are enough psychological kind of evidence now that we know that if you have a sense of anonymity. It's a bit like being in a car. Your sense of the social norm is no longer exerting the same level of pressure on it. Well, increasingly as we see social networks using first name, using real faces, we're seeing people's behaviour change accordingly. So as we remove that sense of anonymity, that is improving behaviour to an extent, and obviously there's a long way to go. But I don't think that means we don't want to have spaces where we can be naughty. Yes, of course we do. It's just about making sure that we know where we are and it's clear to people what they're expecting.
Okay, well, all I will say is, in closing on this particular topic, is that I still think that in a shared social VR or immersive space, I still think those people who have a gaming background and an MMO gaming background at that still have a distinct advantage over those who don't, because they understand how these tribes work, how the behaviors work, and how the social etiquette works in a way that others will not. So yeah, basically geeks win the future.
Geeks have inherited the earth.
They have inherited the earth.
I mean, have you watched Sword Art Online, the anime series?
Obviously, Sword Art Online is a natural precursor to all of this. Again, if you've not watched Sword Art Online, it was a Japanese anime TV show years and years ago now. We're talking 1990s or something like that. It's on Netflix. There are 3 series of it. The first series, basically, it's a game. It's a VR game. You put a headset on and you go into a virtual world and you play this game. The main theme, though, was the big baddie who had secretly coded something into the game that locked everybody in, and then if you tried to leave and take the headset off, you died. So everybody was trapped inside the virtual world. But it was about consequences. It was about consequences within the virtual world. But what I am going to say is this has been a marathon podcast for Summer in the City here in London at the Excel Centre. And what we would like to do is to make sure that our listeners, as usual, have a way to find out a little bit more about you, what you're up to. We ask you to do this by sharing with us your social media handle of choice. So we will go in a lovely circle in this direction.
It's Neil Romanek. It's at Rabbit and Crow, all one word, at Twitter.
Wonderful, thank you. You can follow me on Twitter at live_digitales.
You can follow Adam on Twitter using at Scubadam, Scuba DAM.
Hi, you can follow Emily Savage at Twitter, and it's at Emily J Savage. All in capitals, because I definitely started that account before I understood Twitter. So yeah, I'm shouting.
I can show you how to go to your account settings, and you can actually change that. Mookie, at Mookie Approved on Twitter and most platforms.
And I have an obscure one. It's Athanasius, so at ATHANATEUS.
Rightmove.com. Best app.
So you don't want to share your social media handle? What about the website for Hello?
It's helloworldlife.com. Or I think my Twitter is Jason Perry Rock, which is a bit embarrassing.
We'll figure it out and we'll put it on the podcast notes. I noticed that nobody had the guts to offer anything other than Twitter. And it's ironic because we're at a YouTube festival and nobody offered their YouTube channel. So I'm pointing at you guys. I said social media handle of choice, and it was interesting that your natural response was to go with Twitter. So, as always, I want to thank you for listening and thank you for joining us on this Digital Jam session. Coming live at you from the Summer in the City Festival here at London XL Centre. If you enjoy this content, don't forget to subscribe and review, and follow us on Twitter at Digital Jam Ltd.
digitaljamsessions.com